busy couple of hours here. I'm Connell McShane filling in for Neil. And with the president continuing to talk tough on tariffs, despite some pushback from his own party, we've seen stocks today move up and now down. Certainly more down than up. A bit of a fall on reports of division in the White House over the tariffs. Then you had some comments coming in from Capitol Hill and the Speaker of the House, who I guess seems to want to talk the president off the ledge on all of this. That would be his point of view. To the Hill's contributor Liz Peek, Trump 2020 Advisory Board member Jason Meister, and the radio talk show host Ben Kissel on all of this. And let me start with you, Liz, and we could start a number of different places, but what Blake said and reported on Paul Ryan's comments and all of this. Obviously, there are people in the president's own party, including Ryan, that are trying to talk him out of being more aggressive on tariffs. But what did you make of that Ryan argument that, yeah, China's doing some stuff they shouldn't be doing, but this is not the way to go about punishing them for it?
I think that's totally right. We haven't really seen the numbers on where Chinese steel is being transshipped through which countries. So, we really haven't got the data on trying to figure out where should those sanctions or the tariffs really land.
Right.
But look, I think this is a confrontation and a schism in the Republican Party that's been a long time in coming. You have the Chamber of Commerce Republican Party, and then you have a lot of Trump supporters who basically don't think that everything that's good for big business is necessarily good for the worker. So I think there was bound to be some issues on which there was going to be this divide. I continue to think this is a big negotiating position for Donald Trump. We are in the midst of we just finished the 7th round of NAFTA conversations, which have not yet been resolved. The Chinese finance minister was in on Thursday. I think it was a tremendous message to him. I think there's a lot left to argue here.
Well, we've heard it, I'll go to Jason next on it. We've heard it twice, right, in the last 2 days, exactly what Liz is saying. First from the president yesterday, and as Blake reported from Steve Mnuchin today, that if you do right by us by NAFTA and we're able to renegotiate it, Canada and Mexico, this won't apply to you. So that leads to this theory that it is a negotiating tactic. Think it's a good one?
I do. I think that we have to recognize that we have a businessman in office. We don't have an influence peddling community organizer. So he's resetting the table to negotiate better trade deals. We've had terrible trade deals for 20 years or more. And we finally have a president that's going to reset the table. And he ran on a campaign for the American worker. And
right.
he's gonna make sure that, and he ran against both Republicans and Democrats on this issue. So he's gonna put the American worker before everything.
You're chomping at the bit, Ben.
Well, I got to say, he did run on a campaign for the American worker, and the irony of these tariffs is it would hurt the American workers,
no,
specifically farmers in my home state of Wisconsin, Michigan, all across rural America would be devastated.
No, you're right about that.
50 times more likely to use steel as opposed to create it. So it's just a horrible idea.
I mean, that's the problem with it is that those numbers are pretty much indisputable. Is that they're it's so far off the grid in terms of the number of companies making steel. If you look at it in employment totals, Jason, it's 140,000 versus the companies that use steel. That's 6.5 million.
But Shay, the world makes too much aluminum and steel. So this is about preserving precious metals, which also, by the way, is a national security issue. We have to protect ourselves. We have to protect our country. The president ran America first, right? These are American first policies.
Larger issue there. We're going to talk about this more a little bit later on. But Liz, that's an interesting point that Jason brings up on national security, right? Because that's the argument in the trade law that the president is using here. But with the comments we've seen the last couple of days, this was pointed out by Karl Rove, by the way, this morning when he was on with Maria, the president has used basically come out and said, I'm using this to leverage Canada and Mexico on NAFTA.
Yeah.
So that kind of works against his own argument, which he will have to defend in front of the WTO.
I think that's right. That certainly complicates whatever kind of negotiation we have with WTO, because they could say this is illegal based on what you just said. So that was sort of a muddling of the waters. I think it's too bad that the trade discussion has started here, because in fact we do need a trade discussion. We are the most generous country on earth. Much more targeted things. Let's talk about automobiles, where we have almost no tariff on cars coming in, and everyone else has big tariffs on cars going out. There are all kinds of places where we could negotiate, but this is not maybe the strongest
Well, what about intellectual property, too, which could be the next one? That's the big one with China, but go ahead, Ben.
Yeah. One of the areas that I haven't heard really discussed is Xi Jinping just made himself leader for life in China.
That's right.
They're going to win a trade war. We only have a finite amount of time for Donald Trump to be president.
On that comment,
they have all the time in the world.
I don't think, unless history, you guys can correct me on this, or Jason, I don't think anyone wins trade wars, to be honest. I mean, we don't have very many of them, but the one that is most most given as an example is the 1930s with Smoot-Hawley, and it started and got out of control. But nobody technically wins trade wars. They're usually lose-lose situations.
But if all these countries are cheating us for so many years and we just decide to finally stand up for our own country, I don't see what the problem with that is.
Well, the argument is how do we do it?
Right. Exactly.
The argument is how do we do it?
And
should we be more
by the
targeted,
way, part
right?
of how we've been doing it under Wilbur Ross is through better enforcement. And I think everyone's on board with that, right? If we are not stepping up and saying you are infringing this agreement that we have, we should be doing that. And I think it was great when he was just doing that, and maybe not this sledgehammer that we now have.
I want to ask Jason a political question and this kind of gets to the heart of what Paul Ryan's trying to do here, right? Because the president's not on the ballot in November, but all of Congress, or at least all of the houses, and many of members of the Senate are in some states where this is going to be a big issue. It seems like, from what the Republicans are saying in Congress, that they're concerned about this hurting their midterm chances. Your view on that and whether the president will listen to their concerns?
Yeah, I think it's going to actually help. I think that he's bringing production back. Look at the tariffs that they did on solar and look at the results. It's going to have the same effect here.
The results being that there's more jobs being created in the United States rather than shipping them in from overseas.
Right. Correct.
Ben, on that, on the political, who wins?
Success, but
Well, who wins and loses, though, on the politics of this particular issue?
I think the Republicans lose on this because I think the bottom line is the American workers are going to see increased prices, and it's going to hurt them at the grocery store and the supermarket. So that's really about it.
And I think that's right. All you need is one or two companies saying, gee, we were going to build a plant in the United States and start exporting from there, but now that looks like a really sort of disadvantageous
We have very
situation.
recent history with George W. Bush in 2002 when he passed tariffs. It only lasted 1 year, 200,000 jobs lost. They're predicting 176,000 jobs lost and only 33,000 created. I just don't get the math on it.
Yeah, there was one study was down 146,000. Of course, tough to predict, but that's what they said about these tariffs. All right, thanks to all three of you.